If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, welcome back to the show. I'm glad to tell you we've got Durrheim here, and he's going to tell us about his time in the dark unit. He will also give us a bit of a background on where the police dark unit come from and what they do. It is fascinating. As for the first episode, we had some problems with the internet in East London, and so we asked him to record his answers to questions which I've sent to him. It's a format which works well because I cannot interrupt, which is a good thing, I suppose. And we'll just have to live with it until the internet improves. Tim, welcome back. Thank you for being here. I recall when I got to King Williamstown, you were already there, and you were a member of a dark unit. And I think you also had an explosive dog. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the dark unit, background, things like that, and also about yourself in the dark unit.
Hi, Chris. To answer question 4 about the dog unit. The dog unit comprised of your uniform branch. You had your patrol dog, explosive dog, and then there was also a dacha, we called it a dacha dog, which was used primarily to detect dacha. At a later stage, they progressed to do other drugs as well, but in my day, it was mainly dacha or cannabis for the dacha dog. Your patrol dog was used for general police duties to assist you. If a suspect ran away, you could use your dog to apprehend the suspect, as well as letting him search for suspects in a building or in bushes. So he was of great use to us policemen in our fight against crime. Your explosive dog was normally a patrol dog, but you done a more advanced course teaching him to smell out explosives. You must remember that at that stage in the 80s, you could say we were in a war situation, and weapons and explosives were smuggled into the country. So it was our job to try and prevent that. You also got on your detective sides a dog master who mainly used bloodhounds and Doberman pinchers for tracking purposes. They done other things as well, but it was mainly tracking. If a suspect left the scene, they would follow the tracks. And then you also got your sheepdog, which was part of your stock theft units, and the sheepdog handler assisted farmers in gathering their stock and counting their stock if some stock was missing or stolen and such like. So you had your 3 main dog courses. Was your patrol dog, and then your explosive dog came after your patrol dog, and then you would get a sheepdog and your tracker dog. All the dog handlers in those days were trained at the Pretoria Police Dog School in Pretoria West. So you had to go to the dog school to become a dog handler. Nowadays it's different, but in those days all the dog handlers in the whole of the Republic were trained at the one centre, which was in Pretoria, Dog School Pretoria. The dog unit was an elite unit. You trained hard to get a dog, and in East London, for example, there was no flying squads at that stage. So your dog unit was the guys that responded to the serious complaints and were the reaction unit of the police force at the time. I can remember as a junior reservist working with the dog unit. They had a Nissan Skyline 2.8 and yeah, they had all 3-liter vehicles, the old Ford Cortina, and the shift dog vehicle was armed in the boot. You had a LMG, which is a light machine gun. You had a shotgun, and you had your R1 as extra weapons should you get to a situation where they were needed. You had them there in a trommel in the boot of your dog vehicle, so you could respond to whatever situation occurred. I was lucky in that I had worked with the dog unit as a junior reservist, and they all knew me. So when the time came for volunteers to go to dog school, the guys put in a good word for me because of my passion for the police force. And luckily I was chosen to go to dog school. That was in 1985, I think it was. I was sent to dog school on patrol dog course. I was lucky when I arrived at the dog school to have one of the dog handlers from East London who was there on the explosive dog course. So I didn't feel so lonely, and he took me around and showed me where everything was and explained everything, how everything worked, and also showed me where the kennels were. We were divided up into classes. There were 6 policemen in a class, led by an instructor, and then you had a warrant officer who was in overall charge of your class. Each class had a vehicle. In those days we had a Toyota Land Cruiser, which was fitted with 6 kennels in the back. So when we were busy with our training and we had to get from point A to point B, the whole class's dogs were able to go with and do our training wherever the instructor took us. When I was shown the kennels, each class had 12 dogs, and you could choose which one you wanted from out of the 12 dogs. Each class had their set of 12 dogs, and the 6 that were chosen you started training with. The other 6 were your spare dogs, which you still had to look after, clean their kennels and feed them every day as well. So you could choose which dog you wanted, and some of the guys were bitten when they tried to get the dogs out. Some of the dogs were more friendlier, but it was a bit nerve-wracking the first time to go and take the dog you had chosen out of the kennel. A typical day at the dog school would start at 5 o'clock with PT, and one of the instructors would take the PT for about an hour and a half, and then after that we would go back to our rooms, have a shower, and go downstairs to the mess where we were supplied with tea and rusks, and then we would stand parade and move down to the kennels where we would take our dogs, and depending on what the instructor wanted to do, we would work with our dogs for the morning. And around about 10 o'clock was breakfast, so we would put our dogs back in the kennels, go up to the mess and have breakfast, and then at about 11 o'clock we would assemble again, go down and fetch our dogs, and continue to work till roughly 3:30, where we would put the dogs back in the kennels, feed and clean the kennels, feed the dogs, clean the kennels, should I say. And once that was done and our dogs were taken care of, we would then finish for the day at around about 4 o'clock. And we had our free time. We could go to the canteen, which was, of course, where I spent all my time, and had supper in the early evening. And till the following morning again, we were free to do what we wanted. And then the same process the next day. We would come. Weekends we didn't work with our dogs. We were on standby every second weekend, where we had to still feed the dogs and clean kennels, but we didn't actually do any working with the dogs. They also needed a rest from the week's work. And Monday morning we would start all over again. There was a road around the dog school, around the perimeter fence, which was 5 kilometers long, and sometimes that was the route we had to take. Along this route there was a hill which was named Thrombosis, because when we got there it was real heart attack effort to get up that hill. And another feature at the dog school was the reservoir, which was a reservoir on top of a hill behind the dog school. So when the instructors thought it necessary, we were sometimes sent there, luckily not too often, to visit the reservoir. And we had to go right up. The instructors watched that we got there and then come down again. We obviously had to be fit to work with our dogs, so that was why we done PT every morning, starting at 5 a.m. For an hour and a half. Sometimes we would run in a platoon formation with our dogs, and it was quite something when somebody had been drinking a red hot rum the night before, and suddenly let off a wind and he was in front of you in your platoon formation running with your dog. You just see guys scatter. We started training the dogs in obedience. They had to listen to our commands, and that entailed a lot of things. They would walk next to you. We do a lot of walking with our dogs, get them used to walking in the right position next to you on your left-hand side. And when you turn, they would obviously have to turn as well, and stop when you told them to stop. You done obstacles, which was a tunnel they had to go through, and then once they got to the other side they had to turn and sit down and then return when you gave them the command. The same with high jump and long jump. And then there was also like a balancing beam they had to cross. All the obstacles they had to do for passing out parade at the end of the course. they had to do it. Yeah, of course, it's a process because you untrained and the dog is untrained. So it's a process for both of you that you go through, a learning curve. You learn your dog's habits eventually and his moods. And the same with him, he learns your habits and moods. But yeah, at the start of your course, your dog is totally untrained, starting from scratch. That is why the main focus at the beginning is obedience, to get your dog to listen to you. And then other things are added on during your training. You start with tracking. You walk short spore or tracks, and then eventually you lengthen them towards the end of your course. You do a thing called squaring, where your dog has to pick up objects that a criminal has dropped and retrieve them and bring them back to you, as well as tackles. And we've done quite a few different types of tackles. You do a water tackle where the dog gets sent across a little stream to get to the suspect on the other side. You do a bicycle tackle and a firearm tackle where the guy is shooting blanks, and the dog must not be afraid to tackle because of the gunshots. So yeah, it was quite an involved process, all in all, and it took roughly 4.5 to 5 months to complete. After you had passed out at dog school, you got your gold dog badge, which we proudly wore. And yeah, you were posted back to your station or to the nearest dog unit. I was posted back to King, although at that stage I was the only dog handler there. So I had quite a few difficulties in the beginning. But yeah, that's how it worked. And then you obviously have to keep training the dog. So I used to go down to East London to the dog unit, I think every second week or once a month, for dog practice, where we would practice with our dogs, and just to keep them up to standard. Mainly we were more worried when we got out of dog school if the dog was going to tackle in real life, because at dog school you've got a guy with a tack suit on, and some of the dogs would attack ferociously on that attack suit, but when it came to a person without a attack suit, they didn't really know what to do, so they had to be taught again outside on the practicalities of the work. My class at dog school was all guys from the Cape Province. I had a guy from Oudtshoorn, one from the Karoo, from a small place called Hanover, which was like a one-horse town, I believe, and a couple from Cape Town and Paul. So my whole class was Cape Province boykies, and we couldn't really go home for weekends as such, so we might stay there in Pretoria for the 5 months, and I think we got one weekend, was the Easter weekend, a long weekend, that we were able to go home during this period. But yeah, it was very enjoyable. Good guys, good instructors. The dog school had a very good reputation throughout the world. I know they trained dogs to walk on the tightrope, and they walked across the tightrope, turned on the other side, and came back again blindfolded. And I think that was the Guinness Book of Records feat. So yeah, they were renowned across the world for the high standard. I know for explosive dog course you had to get 96% and above to pass as an explosive dog handler. We also taught our dogs to do 8 bluff. I can't really translate that to English. 8 bluff is when your dog is sent into a building and has to find a suspect inside the building, or otherwise in bushes, where suspects run into bushes, and you have to send your dog in, and he has to actually bark when he gets to the suspect. So yeah, it's a lot of repetition that you have to do. It's every day, repeat. With the tracking, like I said, you started small tracks of maybe a couple of meters, and eventually you might have walked at passing out a track of 100 meters, if not more. So yeah, it's just repetition. Every day you have to do the same thing over and over again until your dog gets to know what is expected of him. What I enjoyed about being a dog handler, there weren't too many dog handlers in the whole of South Africa at that stage, so it was a privilege to become a dog handler. And you also met most of the other dog handlers at some stage. When I was on patrol dog course, you had the guys on explosive dog course. You also had the guys that were going to the border to perform border duties that came to the dog school first for aanpassing, a week where they had to get all the equipment and things like that. So you got to meet most of the guys at some stage of the game. When you're on a more advanced course, you again meet the guys that are on patrol dog course, and so it carries on. So it was a small community within the police force, and you knew most of the guys, or you knew of the other guys from different units. The guys used to tell you stories about legends in their own units. So yeah, it was a real privilege to be a dog handler at that time. We mainly used German Shepherds for patrol dog duties. And my first dog, Caesar, I worked with him a couple of months, and he got hip dysplasia and then contracted biliary. So he had to be put out. I then got a new dog, also a German Shepherd, Trevor, and he was actually a fully trained explosive dog, and his handler had left the police force, so I took him over, and yeah, he became my next dog. I worked with him, and I went back to dog school the following year to do explosive dog course with him. When I went to explosive dog course, I was with 4 guys from East London that were going on their patrol dog course. So they were a bit nervous, they didn't know what to expect. And we also had a whole lot of student constables going up to police college. with us on the train. So it was quite a eventful journey going up to Pretoria, and the poor recruiting officer who accompanied us had his hands full trying to control everybody. We didn't make his job any lighter neither, but that's another story for another day. My friend Terry de Blanche, who was with me on patrol dog course, was also with me on explosive dog course. So yeah, it was nice to have somebody that you knew to be going through the same course together again. When you were on explosive dog course, you used a harness which you put on your dog, so he would be able to differentiate from normal patrol duties, because on explosive dog course you didn't want him biting people as such, and to concentrate on the work of finding explosives. So they were given a harness, or we put a harness on them, so they could know when that harness was on, their job was slightly different to being a patrol dog. The explosive dog course was interesting. We had to do a searching of buildings, schools, stadiums, and a place where lots of cars were, such as parking lots. So we done a lot of practicing. It was also again routine, repeat every day, the same thing. But yeah, the passing out was 96% at the end of the course, and yeah, then you became an explosive dog handler. The last course I attended as a dog handler was the dog bush course, which was your counterinsurgency training with the dog. That was done at Uppingen Dam Basis, which was in the Eastern Transvaal. In those days, it was known as the Eastern Transvaal. I'm sure it must be in Mpumalanga. It was a farm that the police owned, and the course was run by the late Putti Wessels, who was a renowned instructor in dog unit circles. This was the same base where the police trackers were trained, and you got 2 tracker courses, the basic, which was partly also done at the dog school in Pretoria, and then out here at the Uppingen Dam Baas. And then you got the advanced tracker course, which was done here as well as partly in the Kruger National Park. These courses were very, very difficult, and not many guys made it through to the advanced tracker course. I think at that stage there must have been about 60 or just over 60 advanced tracker course people in the whole of the Republic of South Africa. So it was a real honor if you managed to pass that advanced tracker course. So our instructors were all people that had passed the advanced tracker course, They knew their story, and there was only a handful of us on course. I think there was 12 of us altogether, and yeah, so the instructors actually outnumbered the guys that were on course. We were taken from the dog school in Pretoria by truck to Uppingen Dumbasis, and before we got to the base, we were dropped off and told to take all our luggage and belongings, and we were searched. Our luggage was searched, so we didn't manage to smuggle much foodstuffs in. After that, we were sent to the place where we were going to stay, which was a tent in the middle of the bush. There was no facilities there. We were about a kilometer away from the main base where the instructors stayed, and they had all the facilities there: canteen, swimming pool, nice cabins that they could sleep in. We had nothing, just this old army tent and our sleeping bags, and that was that. And that was where we stayed for 6 weeks. There was no shower or washing facilities, a toilet. We had to dig a hole, and yeah, it was very, very tough going, especially for us city slickers, not used to the farm in the bush. It was the first place where I actually sleeping under the stars. You could see satellites in the sky, and the stars were more predominantly there because there was no other lights around us. There was not even other farms close by to where our base was. One thing that does stand out about that course for me was that my dog had to have treatment at the vet. So I was taken along with another course goer with his dog to what was then Potgietersrus by two instructors in an open Land Cruiser. We had to sit at the back holding our dogs so they didn't fight with each other, and we were dropped off at the vet in town in the late afternoon. You must just realize that we had been staying in the bush for approximately 3 weeks. We weren't washed, we weren't shaved, we were dirty, full of scratches, and we had short camo pants and green tackies and a green t-shirt, nothing else. So we didn't look very much like policemen, but I'm sure the people of the town knew who we were, and the other course goers had given us money and asked us that if we got the cap to go to a shop to buy, and we had a whole list of things that they wanted, mainly cigarettes and rice for food. We got to the vet and our instructors left us there and they rode off. They said they're going to the police station and we would be back later to collect us. So we thought that this was an opportunity, and we told the lady inside the vet, which was a house converted into his surgery, that we were just running up to the shop. We would tie our dogs under the trees in the yard, and we just wanted to run up to the shop quickly and get some stuff. Whether she found our instructors or it was all planned, I'm not sure. But we ran up the road to the shop. But before we could reach the shop, the instructors, we saw their vehicle coming around the corner. So we sprinted back to the vet, but obviously we had been spotted. Nothing was said at the time. Our dogs got cheated. We went back to the base and put our dogs in the kennels and told the sad story to the other course goers that we couldn't get to the shop. And one of us had to work guard duty in the evenings at the instructor's base, and it was around 12 o'clock. The guy who was performing guard duties was sent by the instructors to come and call us. We ran up to the instructor's base and stood in parade, and the instructors then confronted us about this story of going to the vet and trying to get to the shop. We were then loaded up into our old flatbed Bedford and taken with our webbing and R1s plus a LMG and the big radio, about 20 kilometers away from the base where we were dropped off, and told that by 6 o'clock the following morning we must be back at base. Well, I tell you, that was one of my longest nights. I was carrying the LMG, which started feeling very heavy, and the other guys also assisted me in carrying it and the radio, but still it was a long 20 kilos to walk back to base to pay for our transgressions. But we eventually got to base, and the day continued. We carried on with what we were doing, and it was a thing I will never forget. The place where we were dropped off was called Buster's Neck. So I can remember that Buster's Neck patrolling, I think, for the rest of my life. The course was 6 weeks. The last few days we done a mock, or the instructors done a mock. The instructors done a mock attack on our old farm ruins close by, and then us course goers with some of the trackers that were there at the base had to do a follow-up, and then there were 2 instructors that were supposedly the terrorists, and we had to follow now their spoor, and they had to try and get away from us, and we had to try and catch them. This little game of hide and seek lasted 3 days, many miles up and down, and eventually on the last day we managed to catch up to them and have a mock battle with them, and that was at the end of the course. I remember that just before the mock battle with the instructors, we went through a farm where there was oranges, and because we had been low on rations, I picked a couple of oranges and devoured them en route to the mock-up battle, and my tummy at the end of that decided to say it needs to release itself, and I wasn't much good at the mock-up battle because I was sitting under the nearest bush. At the end of the course, we were given a braai and then taken back to Pretoria. When we arrived at the dog school, the first place we hit was the showers, and I think I stood for an hour under the shower trying to get clean again after 6 weeks of living without washing.
I wonder, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about the dog unit stories? I recall there was an incident where I think a few of you kept a crowd of about 5,000 or something in Grahamstown, away from the High Court, the Supreme Court in those days. I can tell you, as a flying squad member, whenever you were in trouble, you called the dog unit. I also know that the dogs have saved a lot of lives of the policemen themselves. I also recall, Tim, perhaps you can tell us about this too, where a dog handler was knocked unconscious and his dog protected him from a crowd who was trying to kill him. And I also know of a dog who actually caught a firebomb being thrown at the policeman. He actually caught it with his mouth. So if you can tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, Chris, to answer your question 5, dog stories. Yeah, there were many dog stories. It all happened very long time ago. And I worked with some great legends. Colonel Roy Robertson from the East London Dog Unit was one of the best policemen I've ever known and ever had the privilege of working with. Roy was just a good policeman. He had that instinct in him, and you could drive patrol with him and you wouldn't see anything, but Roy picked up something as you drove past, and he'd suddenly say, stop, go back. And I wouldn't know what we were stopping for, but I trusted in Roy, and true enough, you would make an arrest, or there was something that had made him suspicious. His instinct kicked in, and yeah, he was just one of those guys that was a born policeman. He knew his area, he knew every street in East London, and working with him was such a privilege. There are many more. I can't mention all the guys that I worked with, or I was in training with, all of them legends in their own right. And I was just privileged to work with so many of them. Stories that come to mind, personal stories, not so many, but yeah, we did a lot of crowd control, and one dog was worth a lot of policemen in that aspect. Often I was called to do crowd control at sales, at shops in King Williamstown, and alone with my dog you could manage to control a huge crowd, whereas if I didn't have the dog, you'd need maybe 20 or 30 policemen to do the same work. So a dog was worth his weight in gold. And some funny incidents I can remember was before I went to dog school, I was working with a mate of mine, and it was a Sunday morning. We got a complaint about a house breaking in progress. We arrived at the scene, and the complainant pointed to the wall, perimeter wall, saying that the guy just tried to get into his house and had jumped over the wall. I followed and jumped over, and when I landed on the other side, I was accosted by a big German Shepherd. I shouted and pulled my wooden baton out and tried to keep the dog at bay with my baton, while the neighbor eventually came out and took the dog away. The mate that I had been working with was laughing his head off from the other side of the wall, and he thought this was so funny because I was wanting to go to dog school and I was being attacked by Alsatian myself. So that lingered in my memory for a while. I went to dog school, and when I came back, the same mate was in his room in the single quarters, and I was working, stopped at the barracks, took my dog out and let my dog run around a bit, and took him up to my room in the barracks. And we got this mate of mine busy getting ready for night shift. He was standing by his basin in his room, shaving, and I let my dog inside his room. Well, you could hear the yells coming from him, and I called my dog out, and then I said, yeah, you remember that day when you laughed at me? It's payback now. I was also sent to do border duties on the South African border at Osuk whilst being a dog handler. We first had to go to dog school, and then from there we were posted out to the different border posts. I was sent to Osuk on the Swaziland border, and I done 4 months border duty there. We stayed in a farmhouse about 1 kilometer away from the actual border post, and there were 4 of us dog handlers posted there. So we worked shift work. The border post was only open from 6 in the morning till 10 at night, so we didn't really work a night shift, although we did work special duties at night time. But other than that, we were used at the border post to search vehicles, suspected vehicles, for explosives, and we spent 4 months there doing border duty under the tin unit or coin unit. So we did perform border duties on the RSA borders, as well as in Avambulant in Namibia. But as a dog handler, I only performed at the Osuk border post on the Swaziland border.
But I do have a problem. Sometimes after the dog retires, a senior officer would get hold of a dog, a police dog, in retirement. He wants to use it as a pet. And that seldom to never work out. I'm very much against it. It's a working animal. I think when he retires, he should go home to his dog handler, whom he knows and we trust, But how do you feel about this? I would like to hear your opinion.
Um, when a dog was boarded, the owner normally would keep the dog after he was boarded at his private residence, or if you weren't able to, you didn't have your own home, um, it was found a suitable home. In my time, that's what would happen. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if that was abused. I didn't hear of any abuse of that in my time. Uh, that's normally what happened. If the dog was still of working age and could still be worked, and a person left the dog unit, the dog was kept in the police and given to another handler who would just take over that dog, spend a week or 2 weeks aanpassen to get him used to that dog and the dog used to him, and then he would continue to work with the dog. All your commands are the same. It's just the tone of your voice that differs. So it didn't take long for a dog to get used to a new handler. But that is normally what happened to the dogs when they were boarded, or if they could still be used, they were used.
Okay, we've been talking about the dog unit quite a bit now. I can tell you a story about he once chased a criminal down about 20 kilometers. He chased the criminal, and they were throwing stones at each other. At one stage, they were out of ammunition. I believe Tim was out of his shirt as he was running. But he got his man. And then he had to think about how he's going to get back again, after running 20 kilometers into the bushes after this guy. I wonder if you can tell us about that quickly, Tim. It's quite a funny story.
Yeah, then we come to your question 7 about the Breitbach foot chase. I do recall being on duty. It was a morning shift, and being flagged down by a lady who had said her house had been broken into, and the suspect had run away. She had followed him for a distance, so she knew the way he went, direction, and when she saw me, she stopped me and informed me what had happened and where the suspect had gone to. And I saw where she had pointed out there was a hill, and the suspect I could see vaguely running up this hill. I then managed to go up to Bishu, which was on the outskirts of King Williamstown. Bishu was the Ciskei capital. And from Bishu, I took a road which went in front of the route that the suspect had been running in. And I managed to get closer to the suspect, but he was still quite a way in front of me. And I released my dog. The suspect was running down towards Breitbach, which was a little settlement just outside of King Williamstown. Must be about 5 k's out of King Williamstown. And this guy was running in the direction of this little village. So I released my dog and he gave chase. The guy must have been 200 meters in front of us. And I had to, of course, follow. And eventually we managed to arrest the guy. The dog tackled him. And I managed to arrest the guy shortly thereafter. But it was quite a distance that we had to do before we finally apprehended him. But that is, we were still fit, and we had cut down a lot of the distance that he had in the vehicle, so he was pretty tired by the time we got closer to finally chase him and apprehend him. Yeah, of course, my other recollections that I have of that time period when I was in King was sitting at a lecture, station lecture, one afternoon, and normally the lectures were on our rest days, and they were very boring to us young policemen. You heard the same thing over and over again. So I was at this lecture, not because I wanted to be there, but because it was an instruction. And during that period in the 80s, we had a state of emergency. There was a lot of trouble in our land. A lot of things were going on. But I was given special duties at that lecture by our station commander, and told that I had to perform special duties in Bolo, which was other side Durrheim. Bolo was a farming community with basically just farms around. I think there was a hotel situated in the area as well, and it was on the Transkei border. Information was received that farms were going to be attacked, and I was given the job of patrolling those farms that night with my patrol dog. I wasn't very happy because I was on rest days. But my mate next door to me started giggling when he heard that I had to go do special duties. And my station commander then said to him that he could join me on the special duties on patrolling the farming area at Bolo. So we got ready. I got my dog. He brought what we South Africans call patkos, sandwiches for the road for the evening that we were going to spend the whole night there, come back only the following morning. So he brought a whole lot of tuna sandwiches, and off we went to Bolo. We, of course, also had taken antifreeze, which isn't regulation issue, but as old policemen would know, while working in a cold area, there's nothing better to warm me up than a slug of old brown sherry. So off we went to Bolo, patrolled the farms. The evening wore on, and we started to get cold, and out came the antifreeze. We took a couple of swigs and continued on our journey. And the more antifreeze we drank, the sorrier my friend was getting for my dog. So he decided to ask me if we couldn't put the dog in between us in the van. So I took the dog out the kennel and put him on the seat beside us, and we continued patrolling. And the dog smelled the tuna salmis, and of course he started scratching around, sniffing around, opened the packet and started eating this guy's tuna salmis. The guy wasn't too impressed with me, but every time he tried to take the packet away, the dog started growling, so he thought better leave it. And the dog had a nice meal of tuna salmis. We had by then finished our antifreeze, continued with our patrols till the next morning, and then returned back to our station. My friend wasn't very amused with the tuna salmis being polished by my dog, but he had no say in the matter. Another incident that I do also remember was going to assist the railway police who had a problem with people stealing post bags off the train at a certain station or between certain stations, and they asked me if I could assist them and go with them on the train, that we could try and trap these guys that were stealing the post bags. I decided on that night not to take my dog with, because we would be locked up in an enclosed carriage for quite some time, and I didn't know how long we would be locked up in this carriage, and my dog needed exercise, and he also needed to do his things when he wanted to do them, and there would be no place on the train for that. So off we went on our train journey, me and I think it was 2 railway policemen. We got to the station late at night, must have been about 1 o'clock in the morning, and nothing happened. We continued the following couple of stations, and then we eventually picked up past Middle Drift. The guy that picked us up was driving a Cressida sedan. We were dressed in private clothes. Being winter, we were all muffled up with balaclavas and coats and what have you to try and keep warm. Going through the last station before we got picked up, which was Middle Drift, we heard gunfire coming from the town and saw flares being shot up, but we weren't sure what exactly was going on, and because where we were on the carriage, we didn't really have windows that we could look out. We just had slits quite high up, which we could peep and see a little bit of what was going on the outside. So we weren't too sure what was going on, but in any case, we continued to the next station, and we were picked up by another railway policeman in this blue Cressida. We jumped in and we were on our way back to King Williamstown, which must have been about another 30 to 40 k's away, when we were stopped by Sky Police roadblock, and the guys wanted to arrest us. They wanted to know who we were and what we were doing and why we were carrying firearms. So we quickly explained to them our situation, and they let us go on our way. And it was only afterwards that we found out that somebody had been broken out of Middle Drift prison, which was on the outskirts of the little town, and they had suspected it was us who were involved in that situation. But we managed to explain ourselves and prove to them who we were, and they let us continue on our way.
Okay, Tim, and then if I understand your career correctly, by that time I've left already. I was in Pretoria, you were still in King Williamstown. Then you took a transfer to, I think, Fort Beaufort, one of those places right next to Madinsani, which is close to East London. And thereafter you joined Swaphall Coin or Swaphall Tin. Some people know it as Kufut. You asked me not to talk about that, so we're not going to do it. I'm just mentioning for the people here, you're a highly experienced policeman. And then you resigned, like me, you left the police. Can you tell us about your life afterwards? I know that you went through some hard times. I think we all did. It's not easy for you to leave a police force or the army and then just walk into civilian life. It's quite hard. Can you tell us about that?
My last posting in the police was seconded over to the South West African Police Coin Unit, and I was stationed at Oshikati, but that's a story on its own, and I thoroughly enjoyed it there, but I was there for approximately a year, and then I resigned from the police and came back to King Williamstown.
Having known you, Tim, for more than 30 years, I do know that at some stage in your life you turned around. You went off the booze and you became a child of God. Now that's interesting to me and that's fascinating to me because I've never spoken to anyone on this show who has not told me straightforward, we are all believers, we are all people who believe in God, and you are no different, and so am I. And I'm outspoken about it. I don't mind talking about such things. So can you tell us, Tim, what happened to you? Why the sudden change? You were on the wrong road, if I can say that as a friend. Something happened in your life and you turned it around and now you are a child of God and we can see it in your life and I'm proud of you.
It was in November 2005. I was working for a security company. I had a serious drinking problem. Nothing was going right in my life. And I met up with one of our clients, and she asked me to come and visit her, which I did. And she told me about her life, gave me her testimony. She had a drug problem before, and then she told me about God being the only answer. And I decided at that time, then and there, to accept God as my Savior and to take control of my life. I had been drinking for days without eating. That's how bad my situation had become. And the lady prayed for me. I accepted God as my personal Savior and asked Him to deliver me from alcohol, which He did. From that night forward till now, I can praise God's name because He helped me to be delivered from alcohol. I haven't had a drink now. It's going on for 16 years. I haven't touched alcohol. And it was shortly after I had given up drinking that I also gave up smoking. And God's been good to me since then. He's been with me by my side through all my problems and hardships. He has been with me and led me and guided me through all my bad times. So yeah, I'm proud to say I'm a child of God, and it's only through Him that I am where I am today. It was shortly after I had accepted God as my Savior that I went for testing. I was not eating. I had no appetite. I had just been drinking the last couple of days prior to that. So I was not in a good position. I was coughing. So I went to the clinic and got tested, and they diagnosed me with TB, which came as a shock, but God knows best. I was weighing maybe 50 something kilos, and because I wasn't eating, my weight was dropping. So by the time I'd been diagnosed with TB, I was maybe 48, 49 kilos, which is half of what I am now at present. And I had to take treatment, which I did for 6 months. And slowly, God restored my health. At that time, when I was sick with TB, I could hardly walk. I was a skeleton, a walking skeleton. I couldn't bath because I had no skin on my body to protect me from the hardness of the bath. So I had to wash myself with a sponge, and I really was at my lowest at that time. But God restored my health. Slowly I started picking up weight, and I started to get more mobile again. And God fully restored my health. And I'm now working still in the security industry. But if I look back to those days, I would never ever have thought that I could be doing what I'm doing now. And it's only God's grace that I am where I am today.
Hey Tim, tell me, family life. I know you've got a son, and you're very proud of your son because you speak of him often, and he's also on your WhatsApp. You're not hiding him. Can you tell us a little bit about your son, about your family life, your dreams?
Yeah, Chris, the last of your questions, yes, I have a beautiful, healthy son. He's 7 years old. He's in grade 1, going to school. So I'm blessed. God's given him at the right time in my life when I need somebody. And he's given me this special boy. I'm a single parent. My son's mother passed away in 2016. So, yeah, it's a journey I have to go on with him, but it's exciting, and I'm very proud of him. I love him, and like I say, I'm very blessed. God's given me this special gift.
Well, Tim, thank you for your story. I think it's a hard one and it's a good one at the same time. What bothers me about it is that the police lost people like you who really wanted to be a policeman and were good policemen, and then people still resigned and they left, many times for financial reasons. You know, when I was the sergeant in the police, there was a story with the cleaner that the beer breweries were actually making more money than me. And it's not a problem if you're alone, but when you have a wife and you start having kids, yeah, then it becomes a problem. And so we need to look better after our police. It saddens me to hear stories like this where a man who really loved the force then decided to leave. And I'm glad that you're back on your feet. I'm glad that everything worked out for you in the end. God is great. We know His mercy. And thank you for talking to us here. I'm sure you will be back. If the listeners have any type of questions, just leave it below and we'll ask them about it. And thank you for the views. Thank you for being here with us. I say again, if you're a policeman and you're thinking about talking to us, come and tell us your story. It's important. Everybody served and everybody did his best or her best. And thank you to you all. Until we meet again.